Welcome back to the Lighthouse Freedom Podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about selling in these uncertain times and help give you guys some tactics to do so and to do so with power. This is one of those episodes we're going to get into talking about selling and performing in business during uncertain times. We talked about it in the beginning of the season, but the time that we're in economic times is a recession. So these are times that we've not faced before, in my lifetime. And it's created a lot of uncertainty. So with that comes uncertainty from the buyers, consumers, the sellers, all the above. And I can't wait to get into this because, what you're selling is in the real estate space. What I'm selling and what we're providing is in the medical space. But the consumer, there's a buyer and a seller in both, and there's just a lot of uncertainty. And I think it would be a good conversation to kind of tap into both sides where you can add value in what you're providing and how you can help create certainty for the consumer, right?
And what I'll say too is everything comes down to we talk about sales a lot on the last season. I think we did a couple episodes just deep dive on sales, tactics, strategies, things like that. You and I are both very what I would consider high-level salespeople. And if you have a bad connotation of sales, you might want to get that out of your head now, because sales is the ultimate way to achieve wealth and prosperity is getting good at emotional intelligence, tactical empathy, getting good at asking questions, getting good at understanding, what's in it for them, the perspective of the other person or your counterpart that's sitting across from you, and how to, persuade and influence appropriately and create win-win situations. And your ability to do that specifically right now in a recession is of the utmost importance, because people are naturally hesitant to make decisions, right? Everybody is looking at the decision through another lens than they were a few years ago. Even just a year ago, the lens is completely different. So if you don't understand what is motivating the person that is sitting on the other end of the table from you, whether it's a negotiation, whether they're buying $100,000 of medical equipment or they're selling a $10 million asset, it doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, you have got to ask enough questions to understand how they perceive the situation, the purchase or the sale from their perspective. Like, what are the reasons they would do it? And what are the reasons, more importantly, that they wouldn't do it? And you must be able to speak to both of those. And the only way that you're able to figure that out is to ask questions. And the art of sales at the end of the day is the art of asking great questions. And there's a quote that I put out there a lot that just says, when in doubt, ask another question. Like, ask another question. Yeah. And because the questions will guide you, and you're one question away from a completely different transaction, completely different life for honestly. And the sale could honestly just require, one better, more deep question that's not surface level, but gets to the root of some sort of motivation that can lead ultimately to, closing that big deal. So tell me from your perspective, right? In medical device sales and this is big ticket stuff. Obviously economic times, doctors, medical offices are keeping an eye on their profit and loss. How are you adjusting from a sales perspective? How are you guys adjusting to the shifting market and still growing and being more profitable, right? During these times?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what we do is, so we sell biologics primarily, and orthopedics as well. But
what is biologics?
So that's a huge question. So in the regenerative medicine space is where biologics comes in. So
like stem cells?
So it's not stem cells. So exosomes, which is comes from the mesenchymal stem cell, if we want to get down into all the science stuff. But it's a mixture of that and then amniotic products. So amniotic membranes, which come from the placenta, which is basically it delivers a lot of growth properties to something that used to be healed, right? Whether that's, whether it's tendon, outside of bony structure, it's whether it's tendon, muscle, wounds, et cetera.
Yeah. And
so our product offers like accelerated healing in the chronic space.
Okay.
Right. And there's a huge need for it. And, it kind of goes, there's a lot of different places and indications where that product can be delivered. But at the end of the day, we're offering a solution, and we're offering a solution to their physiological problem that they've got to help to treat the patients with, right? So we're in a unique situation where we have a fantastic product to offer, and we also have the financials that are very rewarding for the practice. Yeah. Meaning, within this time, there's a lot of like physicians and doctors are looking at reimbursements, kind of doing this, like everything, right? Like if you look at it just at a glimpse, everything's doing this or it's flatline. So we have something that will enable them to get reimbursed for the work that they're doing, right? So we've come up with something that A, helps the patient tremendously, and B, helps the practice. These practices are looking at all these other ways of making money. They're getting into aesthetics, they're getting into like multi-specialty practices because they need to make money. Yeah, these guys are doctors, and they take an oath to put the patient first. But they've got to provide for staff. They've got overhead just like everyone else. Yeah. Their price per square foot's going up just like everyone else. Yep. And so
I know I'm leasing them the buildings.
Exactly. They're paying you. But
so from a sales perspective, you have to sell, like you almost have to sell that vision and that picture perfect scenario to them, because it's not like they are in a ton of pain, but at the end of the day, to improve their clients' lives, you have to not convince, but almost like you have to convince the doctors that your solution, right, is the way to increase revenue in their practice and help more people. Right. How do you do that?
We ask questions and say that we ask a lot of like you said, high level questions versus, I would say that most of our competitors within the distribution space, they go in with all the data and they get into this habit of just vomiting data. Data dumping, and representatives do it, distributors do it, owners do it. I've seen VPs come in, and the report that I get from practice managers, CEOs, CFOs is just this huge vomit of information while not asking the questions that are important to them, right? So you asked in the beginning of that, well, how do you navigate around that if people and buyers are timid? You have to ask the questions that are going to lead them to tell you what the solution is. Right. And so if you can provide a high value solution, then inevitably you're going to sell, and it's like I tell my reps, if you have a great product, a great offer, and financials make sense, it's hard to be poor. Right. If you can back that up with what's critical in my business, and that's offering that like white glove customer service, customer experience that no one else that we compete with does, then you're going to win in the long run.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. And I want to drive this point home because you said it subtly, but it's a really big point, is you ask questions that are guided to get them to be sold on your solution, but have them think that it's their idea. So that is the epitome of of an amazing master salesperson, is to get someone to think that your idea is actually their idea. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to almost you have to let them drive, but you're actually steering through guided questions. And this is not, by the way, this is not manipulation, or this is not any form of like secret tactics or anything like that. Yeah. This is just straight up, as long as you have an ethical product, you have integrity, the product can actually help people. Yeah. It's good for all people that are involved, right? You have a moral obligation to sell that to that person. Right. Right. As far as them being sold on the solution, it is your percentage chance of closing goes up 1,000% if it's their idea to purchase versus you data dumping and trying to convince them to purchase it. Right. We do the same thing in the real estate space. When I'm buying a new asset, I prefer to buy things, especially right now with where interest rates are, with owner financing. So for instance, I'm under contract to purchase these mobile home parks here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Cool, really beautiful mobile home parks. Guy's owned them for 17 years. He mows the grass, collects the rent and cash, like typical mom and pop owner. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect avatar for me as a new buyer to come in, implement some operational efficiencies. And I was talking to him last week, and I'm trying to get him to hold a note, meaning I don't have to go to the bank to get a loan. I can actually just put a down payment, and then he takes the equity in his property and he rolls it into a promissory note and almost acts as the bank, right?
Yeah.
So he gets a down payment, then he acts as the bank. I pay him interest.
Yeah.
It prevents a lot of me having to go get a new loan on the project, which may be at 8.25% by the time I rate lock, and I can get him potentially at 5-6% because his alternative is, what else is he going to do? Just put it in the bank.
Right.
So when I'm trying to get him to hold a note, I'm not just going to say, hey, I need you to hold a note, or hey, would you be willing to hold a note on the property?
Yeah.
No, I say, hey, let me ask you a question. Have you thought about, the tax implication of a sale here? And what he now comes to the conclusion on is his basis is about $1 million. He's selling for $2.9 million. He has $1.9 million in gain at 25% capital gains tax on long term. He's got roughly a $600,000 capital gains tax bill that he's going to get hit with if he sells it to me cash.
Yeah.
If I go to a bank, get a loan, and pay him out. Who wants to pay the IRS that $600,000?
Right.
I fucking don't.
Right.
I don't want to pay.
Everyone's
anything.
trying to find ways not to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So you ask a question. Hey, have you thought about what you're going to do? Hey, do you have a 1031 lined up to avoid that capital gains tax bill and earn a fixed interest rate at a decent percent? No. Okay. Your money's going to sit in a checking account and just get printed away, right? And just not earn any sort of return. And now you have to go out and search for another deal rather than secure your money against a property that you already know is producing income, that is a secure asset. You just ask those questions, and then logically they're just like, yeah, I should hold a note. Like, I do want a little bit down, but it does make sense for me to just, hold paper on this property.
Yeah.
But I don't tell him that's what he should do. Like, I just ask him questions, and then it becomes his idea.
Yeah. You're asking questions that are going to lead him down the path to the solution.
Yeah. You're just like, they're driving the car, but you're in the back seat, sort of just like tapping their shoulders with questions. Like, you go right here and just kind of tap them with a question here. And it's all, very much just guided questions.
Yeah.
But you also have to be freaking a great listener.
Yes.
Because selling during uncertain times requires you to be an even better listener. Whereas when things are booming, anybody can make money. A couple years ago, if everything was up, you could buy a fucking candy bar, and the next day it was worth, more than what you paid for it. It was just, it's not like that anymore.
Right.
So if you're not actively listening in conversations and trying to uncover where you can potentially press a little bit harder, where you can ask a deeper question to get some of that potential like pain that you could solve or some sort of solution you can present, it becomes the epitome to be a better listener now than ever before when it comes to selling in uncertain times.
Yeah,
for sure.
100% agree.
Yeah. And man, I think, your ability to do all the other things that we're talking about, add streams of income, create your own economy, financial freedom, getting out of the rat race. All those things are predicated on your ability to sell. And if you're not going to be a salesperson and you're not going to be customer facing, your ability to sell others on your idea and your vision and get them to buy in, your ability to sell yourself. Like how important is it to sell yourself every day on what you're doing?
How are you going to hire if you can't sell yourself? If you can't sell your company, why should, people think about, I used to coach people in interviews too. And that's a skill set, right? Well, I think people think that interviews are just one way, right? So it's Houston, I'm interviewing for this job at Pfizer, Eli Lilly, Stryker, name the company, but it's the other way around. And so when the seat changes and you're now in an ownership role and you've got to hire, you've got to expand so that you can scale your company, you can scale your efforts, right? Well, you've got to be able to sell yourself. You've got to be able to sell your belief, your culture. You've got to be able to sell your leadership so that and entice someone, encourage someone to come on and work for your company. Say, here's our goals. Here's how we operate. Here's what we provide for our customers. You've got to be able to sell that, right? And when I think about the competitors that are out there, we talked about what our competition's doing in Q4, getting close to the holidays and all of that. So I'm always thinking about what's the competition doing in my space, in our space, and then what can I do better? What can I do to separate, right? And there's always something. The answer to that question is always in questions to our buyers, to our clients. What do you guys need more of, right? What's working? What's not working? When we go back to the manufacturer, what do you want us to tell them? Right? Is there something that we could be delivering so that your experience is better, so that your patient experience is better? And I'm always amazed at the amount of people that don't do that. They don't ask the question, hey, you're good. You're my customer. Awesome. See you next week. No, you've got to do something to set yourself apart, and asking those questions and how to be better, how to deliver better, how to manufacture better, how to literally get UPS to do what they're going to do. Right?
Yeah. I
Set
think
yourself apart.
And you're talking about something that's really important, which is the lifetime value of a customer. And during economic uncertain times, like your lifetime value of a customer and your customer experience becomes way more important because you have to take care of your existing customers and your referral network. And it's not that you don't take care of them during great times in the economy, but it's easier to get lax on that because new business is coming in the door because people are spending money and expanding. And so it's a little bit easier to be lax on your customer experience and your customer service.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not in the customer service business. So we do have a couple companies that under one of our umbrellas that are customer service focused. And like we thrive on referrals and using testimonials to get new business. And 90% of our conversations on these meetings are like, how do we make sure this customer has a fucking wow experience with us? Because a wow experience tells other people.
Yeah.
And in the age of social media, you know, this isn't 30 years ago where someone has a poor experience. It takes forever for word to get around that you have a crappy experience. Right now, it's immediate.
Yeah.
And the alternative is true.
Impact.
Somebody has a wow experience. It's on social media and you're getting new customers just like that. So
absolutely.
Focusing on, number one, tactical empathy, like we said, understanding it from their perspective. Number two, asking great questions. Number three, just listening. It's all the things that are prevalent and important during great times are just that much more important during uncertain times. It's not even that there's some whole different formula. It's just that you got to be that much better.
It's magnified.
It's magnified.
You
how
gotta
better.
pay that much more attention to everything,
to every detail of your sales game. One thing that I've been doing since I was selling copiers at Xerox that I think sets me apart, and you know, I've told this to a couple of groups of mine, but I truly believe that I'm a pretty world-class salesman. And there's a reason why. It's not because I'm just a cocky son of a bitch. It's because I know that I've done the work.
Yeah.
And I'm up at night listening to my calls and I record every single sales call that I've ever been on, whether it was selling copiers or buying a piece of real estate. And I still, to this day, record all my stuff. And if you go into my coaching group, like those guys will tell you, Chad has all of his recordings in the folder. And I'm up at 10 o'clock at night and I'm listening to a call that I had with a broker or with a seller. And I'm listening for, you know, my voice inflections, my tonalities. I'm listening to see like, oh shit, I stepped on my question. I asked a question and then I asked a question on top of a question, which is called stepping on your question.
Yep.
And what it does is it allows the other person to only answer one, and 9 times out of 10, nobody goes back and asks the original
just doubled
question.
up. They're not going to hit the second.
They don't hit the second one. Or they skip the first one, which is arguably the one that you actually wanted to ask, but you stepped on it.
Yeah.
Again, we're in the weeds on tactics.
No, it's so true.
But like I Tom Brady doesn't go to the Super Bowl without watching game film.
Right.
Are you watching your own game film?
Right.
Like, are you training hard on sales, or are you just fucking winging it? Are you just like flying by the seat of your pants and shooting from the hip, or are you like laser focused and targeted in your sales game? And because if you're not, and you're not measuring it, you can't make it better. You can't tweak and you can't tweak what you are not measuring. And if you don't have a process and you're not listening to yourself and listening to your process and listening to your questioning techniques, you can't make them any better. And therefore your sales game is never going to elevate and you're going to be stuck where you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of salespeople. I mean, what's your training look like for those people, especially right now?
Yeah. So, you know, you said you record everything, like you record every call. So we do a lot of stuff for remote. And so we're actually pitching via Zoom. We're pitching on go-to meetings and things of that nature. So every time before one starts, we record. And then we have an office here in Murfreesboro. And so we'll actually go back and look over that and hit exactly what you just said. So it's like breaking down game film, like you mentioned, like Tom Brady. It's just like that, but it's within the sales process.
Yep.
And we get very granular. Like I will actually watch the providers or the customers' body language and reactions. and then go, and I'll stop and say, okay, why do we think we're seeing that? He didn't like that, or she didn't like that, or she's not engaged, whatever the case may be. But we break that stuff down like frame by frame by frame. And then we, in terms of like measuring our outreach and what we're getting feedback on and why, because again, we ship product all over the country. So if we're talking to someone in Seattle that may not see us for 6 months before we fly in to go do a dinner and really get granular with their business and get feedback in person, do the big 20-person dinner and all the fancy stuff, well, 6 months of processes have to take place, right? And so we want to know, we want to measure those reactions. We want to measure what outreach comes back with a positive, what comes back with a negative, what's completely cold, and what we can change and adjust so that we can continue to onboard these big clients across the country.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Track all of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like when you do that and you listen to those, you watch that game film, right? You can, for me, I see like, okay, did you give price too early, or did you give up your leverage too early in a conversation, right? Because your leverage is everything. Like, what does a prospect want? Well, they want your price, right? Maybe that's what they want out of you, right?
Yeah.
So that's your golden goose. So you better ask every damn question that you need the answer for before you give your price, because the second you give your price, they're under no obligation to answer anything else. They've got what they want from you, and they can move on. And then you become the chaser of the prospect, right? And that is where a lot of salespeople live, is they're just throwing out, they throw out proposals, and then they're chasing all this empty pipeline that's never actually going to close, because they're not doing the process the right way, which is, okay, do I have all the decision makers on board? Have I even spoken to all the decision makers? Do I even know who they are? Right. Have I asked all the questions as far as their timeline to close? Do I have competition on this deal? Do I know if I have competition on this deal? Like, what are their criteria for making a decision? When are they planning on making a decision? When is implementation? And if you're just getting on and pitching, and then they're like, all right, I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll think about it. I had salespeople at Xerox, man. They would come back like excited that they got to think about it. And I'm like,
it's nothing.
What the fuck?
It's nothing.
They said they're going to think about it and you're excited. Like that's not that you might as well be. I would rather have a no.
Yeah.
I would rather you tell me they told you no, because at least then we can go out and fill the pipeline up with opportunities that are actually going to close, versus a bunch of people that are sitting on the fence when 90% of them just told you they're going to think about it just to get your price, and then they wanted you out of their office.
They price shop you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I would agree. I think both of us sitting here are very high level when it comes to sales, and entry level sales, it would be very, very difficult in these economic times. So I think it's important that people continue to, be a learner, always be a learner, always be, taking in content, et cetera. But in sales, specifically with the close, so many people think the close is where it's at. The close is the hard part, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the case at all, right? Because while you're having, not just pitching, but while you're having a conversation with the buyer, with the client, with the prospective customer, if you've answered all of their questions adequately, and then you in turn have also asked the appropriate questions, the close is easy.
Seamless.
You closed halfway through the conversation.
Yeah.
The buyer just doesn't know it yet. And again, this isn't like manipulation or anything like that, or some sort of secret tactic. It's just, this is high level selling.
Yeah.
The ask towards the end of the call, the meeting, should be the easiest part, because you are their resource.
Yep. Or it shouldn't even be an ask. Like it should be their idea of like, okay, what's the next step? Like that is the ultimate.
We had one yesterday, and the guy at the end of the Zoom call said, okay, well, when do we get started? Or how do we get started?
Love that.
And
you're like, whoa. I don't know if we want to work with you.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this guy.
Slow down, buddy.
Yeah.
Slow down.
Whoa. Yeah.
But it's, you hit the nail on the head. Master the process, and the close is seamless, because the close will be a product, and it will be, like we said earlier, their idea to get started.
Right.
It was his idea to get started.
Right.
You guys didn't have to say, hey, so when would you like to get started? It's his idea.
Right.
I guarantee you, if you watch that sales call, I guarantee you that process is pretty dialed in.
Oh, we already have. Yeah, we watched it last night.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yep.